Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling. And man, I really appreciate you guys checking out today's video and spending some of your day with me. And today we're going to be talking about the downfall of Lake Chickamauga and a lot of other lakes in the country. This is something you guys hear me talk about, the degradation of our lakes across the country on a regular basis. But I really want to get into this today based upon a Facebook post that I saw Andy Morgan make yesterday about Lake Chickamauga. So we're going to discuss that a little bit and then give you guys my opinion on everything. Also, guys, before we get started, I just want to share with you all two baits that really work good for me in the month of May. If you guys are interested in catching a bunch of fish, the two of my favorite baits, guys, are this Megabass Ouzo Swimmer Swim Jig, a little 3/16 ounce, and this Megabass Sleeper Gill. Guys, I catch tons of bass in May on this thing, just fishing shallow water, less than 4 foot of water. And this sleeper gill, guys, it skips like a rock. Just try this. If you have a boat docks in the lake you fish, skip this sleeper gill underneath the walkway or underneath those pilings in the shade and keep it high on the water column up like this, and they will come up and smoke this thing. So I'll link both of these in my tackle warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to try one. And this is my favorite color, this little pumpkin seed right here. It works really good. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. Yesterday, I saw a Facebook post video that Andy Morgan put out. If you don't know Andy Morgan, superstar angler in the sport, is arguably one of the top anglers that have ever lived. He was the dominating force for a decade on the FLW Tour. Won Angler of the Years, lots of tournaments, and he lives on Lake Chickamauga, fishes there a lot. And they were having the Bass Pro Tour event there this week at Lake Chickamauga. And Andy was talking about how Lake Chickamauga is just sort of a shadow of its former self. Used to put out a bunch of big fish, super tough right now. And, he was basically saying in that tournament, you better take advantage of your forward-facing sonar period or you're going to have a tough time catching them. Now, there's two profound statements that Andy made here that I want to talk about. Number one is that Lake Chickamauga is a shadow of its former self. And number two is that you better catch them during the forward-facing sonar period or you're going to struggle. Guys, now I want you to just take for a second and think about those two statements that he made right here. And I want to apply it to not only Lake Chickamauga, but every lake across the country. Now, I've had a chance, I've been fishing tournaments since the mid-1980s. And back when I started in the 80s and early 90s, we had a chance to go to a lot of these lakes that we had never had tournaments on before. Like we went to Lake Champlain, we went to Lake St. Clair, we went to the Great Lakes, just several lakes across the country that, did not have notoriety that are now famous fisheries. And guys, when you first go to a lake like that has not been hammered by tournaments for decades, you can't believe how good the fishing is. The first time I ever went to Lake Champlain, let me give you an example here. The very first tournament we had was a Bassmaster, I think it was a top 100 we had up at Lake Champlain back in the early 90s. The first day that I was out there, very first day that I'd ever seen the lake before, didn't know anything about it. I got on this flat up north there, and it was sort of like a cloudy, calm day. And guys, I took a Megabass Giant Dog X topwater, and I had over 100 bites on it in one day. Now, let me tell you a little bit, that's just one part of the story, because this is what I would do, is I'd throw out there and I'd catch one, or eventually I had my hooks bent over, but I'd catch one and then I'd hit the trolling motor and I'd go 50 or 100 yards before I made another cast and then catch another one. It was literally like every 2 or 3 casts, I was catching big smallmouth on this topwater lure. You can't do that anymore up there. Those days are over, but that's an example of what happens to a fishery that does not have a lot of fishing pressure on it or a lot of tournaments on it. And that's one of the things that I think that conservation departments say, oh, you need to harvest bass or they're going to get stunted. That's a bunch of bullshit, guys. That's as long as you have habitat and forage in a lake, it doesn't make any difference. There doesn't need to be any fish taken out of it whatsoever. That's one of the biggest myths I've ever seen in fishing that's perpetuated by the fisheries managers. Okay, so given that, that's sort of a microcosm of the bigger picture here, what has happened on our fisheries over the past 30 years, is the amount of fishing pressure that we have gotten on like Lake Chickamauga or any other lake in the country has had a significant, like beyond a significant, it's had a major impact on the quality of fishing in this country. And I'll come out and say it right off the bat. And I'm not being hypocritical when I say this. We have way too many bass tournaments in this country. We don't have any type of regulations on these tournaments like they should be. We have got an epidemic of too many tournaments in this country that is negatively impacting our lakes. Now, here's the thing about it: is back when I was talking about that period there, you had a handful of tournaments back then compared to now. The only circuit, you had the Bassmaster Top 150 circuit, and then you had maybe some buddy circuits, like a buddy team circuit or club tournaments, and that was about it on any lake. You didn't have these, and you had some BFLs and stuff like that, but you didn't have all these just countless numbers of local, regional, national, AAA, offshoots, this and that, just big bass tournaments, just like tournaments out the butt almost every day of the week. And what we have seen over the course of the last 30 years particularly, especially on lakes like Lake Chickamauga and these lakes that have a lot of notoriety for bigger fish and they're fairly close to some type of population centers, we've seen just a massive reduction in the quality of the fisheries in that area. And not only a reduction in the quality of the fisheries, but we've seen the bass evolve to become super educated and super smart and super difficult to catch. And their habitats and their patterns are changing to basically match that heavy fishing pressure. Okay, that's number one. Second with that is the forward-facing sonar aspect of it. Because, when Andy made this comment about you better catch them during your forward-facing sonar, period, or you're going to have a tough time. I want you to absorb that a second. Now, here's Andy Morgan, who I have got a tremendous amount of respect as an angler for, is basically saying, or not basically, he is saying that if you have to fish traditional regular bass fishing skills on Lake Chickamauga, you are going to struggle. The only way that you're going to excel is by fishing with forward-facing sonar. Prime example on Lake Chickamauga. 30 years ago, all you had to do is get out there on those channel letter sections and ledges and fish those hard structure places that a lot of people didn't know about, and you'd blow the field away. Now you probably can't catch a fish out there. Since those fish have been educated and they've evolved to suspend out in open water, allowing the forward-facing sonar anglers to catch them. So this entire thing about forward-facing sonar, the problem you have is when you take forward-facing sonar and then you have a fishery in decline like Lake Chickamauga, and then you put forward-facing sonar in this particular tournament that they have, like a Bass Pro Tour, they're going to catch a bunch of fish with forward-facing sonar, and it's going to create this illusion to the public that everything is okay and the fisheries are okay. If you look at the Bass Pro Tour weights from yesterday, they caught quite a few fish there. But here's the thing about it. If you take forward-facing sonar out of that equation, and if you take GPS mapping out of that equation, you're going to have a tiny fraction of the catch rate, displayed compared to what it is right now. So the issue that I've talked about a lot, and the issue that the conservation departments need to take into consideration, is that technology, whether it be in the form of mapping or electronic technology or whatever, it's giving us this false sense of security. It's creating this illusion that we're okay, and we're not. Because here's the only true measure of how good a fishery is. If you could take a tournament, take a tournament, and you take all of the electronics away from the anglers, except like a flasher and a 2D sonar. That's all they've got. They've got a paper map. They don't have GPS mapping to find all these sweet spots off the shore. They don't have side imaging, down imaging, forward-facing sonar. All they got is basically a unit that tells you how deep the water is. You take that scenario under that, and then you take the bottom 25% of the field. Don't pay any attention to the top 25%. That's a false positive. The indicative representation of a lake as far as the quality of the fishery always lies within the bottom 25% of the field in a tournament, because the bottom 25% of the field is still an above average caliber of an angler, and that's going to give you more accurate depiction of the quality of that fishery. So if you take that, if you take the technology away from the anglers and then you examine the bottom 25% of the field, that gives you a realistic expectation of the quality of that fishery. And it's a bad deal. I mean, it's a danger signal. It's a red flag that everybody ought to be looking at. So that's another thing with that is like when these conservation departments go out and do these surveys to determine, the quality of the fishery. Number one is they cannot do a survey unless an angler uses only two-dimensional sonar. It's like if they try to do a survey with anglers that use forward-facing sonar, it is going to give you a false positive. And then on top of that, you can't believe angler surveys, guys. When a conservation department agent goes up to a boat ramp and they interview a couple good old boys that just came off the lake, and like I said, they got a 6-pack of Budweiser on the front deck, and they're telling them they caught 30 bass that day, that you can't believe. I'm not saying they're lying, but you can't believe that. That's not any type of legitimate scientific data. And so many of these people out there that are pro spotlighters, they say that conservation departments say it's not hurting the fish. That's because that's how they get their information with it. So anyway, with that's the whole point of what I'm talking about here is that we can't put our heads in the sand with this. It's like when you're talking about the degradation of fishing and the quality of fishing in this country, you can't try to make excuses of it, and you can't try to point to tournament results that are using forward-facing sonar and have advanced technology and are above average anglers as a true measure for the quality of that fishery. Number one, the first thing we have to do, guys, is we have to reduce the number of tournaments. It's like there should be some type of a strict regulatory body in this country that regulates bass tournaments on every lake, where you have to, number one, you have to apply for a permit, and you have to prove that you're able to ensure the safety of the fish, the safety of the anglers out there. And, you're not going to put tournaments on top of the spawning season, and the tournaments are going to be spaced out. There's no reason for some of these tournaments like at Lake Chickamauga or Table Rock Lake here where I live, where they got 3 or 4 tournaments every weekend. There needs to be fewer tournaments. They need to be spaced out further away, and the number of entry and participants in the tournaments needs to be limited. There's no reason for us to be having tournaments with 300 or 400 boats in a tournament. That's too many. It's a safety issue. It's bad on the fish. A lot of negatives to that. So anyway, guys, let me know what y'all think about it, and we'll check later.